A top development from the Israel-Hamas war: fighting has now resumed in Gaza as the 7-day truce in the ongoing Israel-Hamas war has ended, with no further extension announced. Shortly after the deadline ended, Hamas has said that 6 people have already been killed in Israeli strikes in Rafah, while 2 children have been reportedly killed in air raids on Gaza City. Now, Israeli Defense Forces said that it intercepted a rocket launch from Gaza and that Hamas breached the brief ceasefire. The IDF says that it has renewed fire against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Now, in the 7 days that the truce lasted, 80 Israelis were released, primarily women and children, and some of whom are dual citizens. Another 24 foreign nationals were also released. 240 Palestinians had been freed from Israeli prisons, mainly women and minors, and the latest of them being 8 Israeli hostages and 30 Palestinian prisoners exchanged on Thursday. Now, hours before the truce expired, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken urged Israel to create safe zones for Palestinian civilians in Gaza before it resumes operations.
In my meetings today with the Prime Minister and senior Israeli officials, I made clear that before Israel resumes major military operations, it must put in place humanitarian civilian protection plans that minimize further casualties of innocent Palestinians. That means taking more effective steps to protect the lives of civilians, including by clearly and precisely designating areas and places in southern and central Gaza where they can be safe and out of the line of fire. It means avoiding further significant displacement of civilians inside of Gaza.
And earlier we spoke to Caroline Glick, who's a former foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Listen in what she had to say.
They had basically exhausted their pool of hostages because apparently the rest of the women and children they've murdered. So the deal was for live hostages, and they had run out of them. And so that tells us more about the nature of the war crimes. We've learned a lot about that over the past 7 days of the ceasefire, with the hostages coming back and telling stories of starvation and torture. So that's one thing. But, you know, Hamas and Israel was clear that it was coming to an end. It was just a question of when, because Hamas has been violating the terms of the ceasefire all along. And using the time and the American insistence that Israel allow almost unlimited amounts of goods to come into Gaza through the so-called humanitarian resupply, that Hamas now is ready to go because they have all of the food, the medicines. They've been able to use the past week to regroup, to reorganize their forces, and so they're ready. The minute that they were ready, they ended the ceasefire. This is just sort of their normal operating procedure.